All right, Larry Krueger with you on a Friday. Hope everybody's having a great September the 20th as we come at you with Niners Nightly on a Friday. And we're going to talk about the Niners and the Rams with Greg Beacham, who's been covering the Rams for a number of years, the AP writer for the Rams. And he's with us here on Niners Nightly to talk a little bit about the matchup between the beat-up Niners against the beat-up Rams Sunday at SoFi in front of a house that is the Rams' house. Can't hear me?
Gotcha. I can hear you now.
Sorry about that. How
No
you
worries.
doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on, Larry. I appreciate it.
Well, what do you think we're going to see from the Rams? We know, both teams are banged up. There's no Puka Nacua. There's no Cooper Kupp, most likely. I guess how reliable are the other Rams weapons? I'd heard rumors today that maybe Kyron Williams will be used out of the slot with Blake Corum in the backfield. What kind of wrinkles do you think Sean McVay can come up with before Sunday?
I think they'll do the best they can under the circumstances, which are not great when your top three passing targets are out, including Tyler Higbee, who hasn't played yet this year. I mean, they've got guys who can play. Demarcus Robinson and Tyler Johnson are, competent NFL receivers. Tutu Atwell is a guy who's played well in spots when Sean McVay has allowed him to play. But, I mean, they don't have a whole lot they can do. They can try to use Kyron Williams as a pass catcher, obviously, which would be really cool. Get him more involved, getting more touches. They can get Blake Corum more involved, the rookie. He hasn't done a lot. He's touched the ball a little bit so far, but not in a significant way so far. But they're going to have to try the best they can under the circumstances, which is admittedly not good with the skill position players. And that's not even getting into the offensive line, which is walking wounded at this point.
Tell us a little bit about the Corum draft choice. I mean, he was on the national champion Michigan Wolverines. I don't know. I didn't see any in the pre-draft stuff projecting him to the Rams. A lot of people had him going to the Chargers to reunite with Jim Harbaugh. It didn't happen. But I kind of think this is a culture type player. How's he been received? How's he looked this summer?
Well, we were all surprised when he got drafted, just like you were. The Rams team to send Sean and Les Snead in particular, it seems to revel in going against conventional wisdom, drafting a running back in the third round, particularly somebody as small as Blake Corum. But he has fit in very well. He's a guy that they've said they've liked from day one, and Sean has used in a variety of ways. He just hasn't had a chance to get in, really do it in a game yet. He got a few carries, but nothing significant. When they pick a running back that high, you think they're going to use him a lot early on. I mean, with a running back, every hit you take, shortens your career. So you want to get as many touches as possible. Not everybody's Frank Gore. So you got to get guys in there and play while they're young. But hasn't happened yet. But, if they take opportunities to use Kyron Williams in other ways, then maybe Blake Corum will get used in other ways as well. And they'll get into it. But in terms of fitting in terms of a culture thing, I think it's been a really good match so far. He's the kind of guy that Sean McVay likes, a worker, a team first guy, and all that has been great. It's just a matter of finding a role for him on the field.
They spent a lot of money on the offensive line in the offseason. It's funny, the Niners value the defensive line. It seems like the Rams showed this summer or this offseason that they valued the offensive line. And then all of a sudden, Notaboom goes down. Avila, who's a tremendous player. I think of Steve Avila as one of the great young guards in the sport. He goes down. They're going to have Bo Limmer, who's a very good player at Arkansas, but he's a smart guy, but he hasn't obviously he's very young. He's going to start at center. Bruce is going to start at guard.
Logan Bruce, yeah.
How do you see the Rams offensive line? I would imagine the Niners are going to play lots of games up front to try to make this line communicate with one another.
Yeah, I would think they would feast on this line. No disrespect to the Rams line. It's just impossible to plan for as many injuries and position substitutions and changes they've had to make over the last 2 weeks, which is just crazy. I mean, they spend a lot of money. Their number one priority to win has to be to keep Matthew Stafford upright and to establish a running game, and they need to do that with their offensive line. Trouble is, when 3 of those guys are out, 2 of them are playing injured. Kevin Dotson is playing on an injured leg. He's just still out there because he's a baller. But they just don't have a lot they can do in terms of fixing things. They'll use a rookie. They'll use Bo Limmer. They'll use Logan Bruss, a third-round pick who hasn't really panned out yet, and see what they can do. But the trouble is they're playing the 49ers this week, and it's a nightmare week to try to break in new guys, to try to figure out what's going to work and what's not going to work. So I would assume Sean will look at that and say we should not keep the ball in Matthew Stafford's hands any longer than we have to. We should call short routes, play action, move the ball, like you said, use the slot more, something that neutralizes or minimizes the impact of San Francisco's pass rush. But Sean often looks at that and says, okay, I'm going to do the opposite because that's what somebody's going to expect me to do. So we'll see what they end up doing. And, if you fall behind, then you lose you lose a lot of the initiative anyway. So I think they'll do the best they can, but I don't expect them to win that matchup. I just can't imagine that.
Greg, you're a pro's pro. You've been doing this for a while, and you've seen other coaches beyond McVay. But so you're probably be a good person to ask. Like, where does McVay kind of fit in the grand scheme of things as far as the media? What's it like to cover him? Does he let you in? Does he show trust there, or does he keep everybody a distrusting arm's length? Is he personable with people? How is he on a day-to-day basis to cover?
He's changed over the time he's been here. When he came, he was 30 years old, youngest coach in the NFL, a position he would hold for the next 7 seasons. And when he came, I always told people, this guy's playing a character. He's playing the youngest Gruden brother. He's learned from Jay. He's learned from the guys who were in the coaching tree how to sound like a coach, how to express information like a coach, how to say you have a real respect and appreciation for everything, how you always make sure you name your assistant coaches. Whenever somebody asks you a question about a receiver, you name your receivers coach. Eric Yarber's doing a great job with that guy. And a lot of that is commendable. And if I had been 30 years old and I had to talk in front of everybody in the world, 3 times a week, I would have picked Persona 2. It seemed like the easiest way to handle that. As the years have gone on, I will say he's let us see more of who he is. He drops a swear word every once in a while, and feels really naughty about it. And he'll make jokes occasionally. He has kind of a cutting sense of humor, which you've seen on Hard Knocks a couple of times. But in general, he's developed a public persona that has kind of become part of him. So, what he was playing early in his career, that's who he is now to a certain extent. I don't think any reporter will ever really get to know him just because he's a focused guy on one thing. But once he leaves coaching, it'll be interesting to talk to him again and have a beer and see what he's like and what he has to say about the exchanges he had with the media over the years and how he adjusted and evolved.
When's that going to be? Is he going to be a short timer like a John Madden who becomes a TV sensation? He's right there in LA. He's a good looking guy. He could probably do that. Or you think he's more like a Kyle Shanahan, the more I'm around Shanahan, the more I think this guy's going to do this for a long, long time. What do you think?
Right.
If you a short timer or a long, is this just the beginning for McVay?
He had that third life crisis a few years ago where he was talking about, I'm going to be on TV someday. I won't be around as long as you guys. Ha ha ha. And then he kind of went through a couple things after the season. And he's a guy who gets so wound up, who gets so worked up in the lifestyle, in the preparation, in the competition that when he gets to the end of a season and it releases, he has these kinds of thoughts. He's like, I can't believe this. I could just go to TV and relax and not work. But then the competitive side of him kicks in again. He needs about a week off. Then he remembers, oh my gosh, I got here because I'm competitive, not because I want to be on TV and look pretty in a suit. So I think I've always thought he would stick with this team as long as the current core was together because it was a really fun core and then see what would happen after that. Trouble is that core is largely gone except for Stafford and Kupp at this point. So he seems to have embraced the challenge of building a new team here. He's talked a lot about it, which he would not do if he had one foot out the door. He's very much said, I'm going to stick with this. He's realized that coaching is what he is, what he does. He's also figured out how to do it a little bit better, how to make his life a little more balanced. He's got a wife and a child now, and he's kind of realized, you can do this and still have a life outside of football. I think Kyle Shanahan's done a great job of embracing that. Like you said, he's probably going to do this forever. He might be the Niners coach forever, but he also, he has a family and he knows how to balance his life. And I think Sean McVay has made strides in that as he's 38 years old now, and he's starting to figure out what he wants to do the rest of his life. Having said that, if the Rams are really bad this year and if they don't make significant improvements next year, I could see him being like, this might be a long-term project for somebody else. I'll go do TV and then I'll come back to the New York Giants for $50 million a year or something, some massive thing like that. But I think he has everything he wants in LA, and it's just a challenge for him to build a winning team out of the pieces of what he's got right now. They're not that far away, but they're not close right now either at this moment. So I think it'll depend a lot on how this season goes, and more importantly, next season.
I asked Kyle Shanahan a question this week at the presser. I'm going to share the screen and play this for you and listen to what he said here. I asked him about the Rams, and he's fully aware that the Rams are going to come into this game somewhat desperate. What is your assessment of the Rams, Kyle? They come into this game, you would think, pretty desperate.
Yeah, I mean, anytime that you lose like they did, I mean, and being 0-2, I mean, I know that feeling. And in the NFL, whether you lose 2 in a row after winning 10 in a row, or you start 0-2, if you lose 2 in a row in the NFL, it's always a kind of an Armageddon feeling in a building, especially when you lose lopsided like that. So, you know how teams come out the week after that. It's such a fine line in those things. I mean, we were a couple of plays away from the game going like that in Minnesota. So it can happen so fast. And all you got to do is watch the Detroit game the week before to see how good of a team this team can be. I mean, they'd taken it to overtime in the fifth quarter to get a chance to win, and how they had to come back to do that there at the end. So last week got out of hand a little bit early, especially the 4 plays they had on offense and just not getting started quick. But by no means was that an indication of what this team's going to be going through the rest of the year.
I mean, I don't know, Greg. It's like we all like to think of ourselves as independent thinkers. We're not part of group think, let's just say. But you know what? It's so damn hard in the NFL. It's like, I think right now the prevailing wisdom is, man, the Niners are, running into the Rams, and the lowly Rams. They're just going to rampage them. It's going to be domination from start to finish. Puka's out and Cooper's out and this and that. But you know what? I saw week 1 and they look pretty good. And you know what? Maybe it wasn't that the Rams won 10 games last year. Maybe the Rams aren't so bad. Maybe Detroit's one of the best teams in football. Maybe Kyler Murray has found himself, in Arizona might actually be pretty good. They get good weapons, the tight end, the wide receiver, the back. I mean, come on. I think there's a chance that people are looking at the Rams in those 2 games going, they're 0-2, they're bad. It may be that Arizona and Detroit are really good. What is your perspective on it?
Yeah, it is. It is hard to make a judgment after 2 weeks. You're right. There's a lot of different scenarios that could play out. The biggest problem for me in believing in the Rams being, much better than 0-2, much better than the team that got dog walked by Arizona last week, is that their defense is not a championship caliber defense. I don't think so. I don't think they thought it would be going into the season. You can't make up for the loss of Aaron Donald, and they didn't even really try. They just sort of said, we're going to get guys, from within, we're going to promote, and we're going to draft. We drafted Braden Fisk to play up front. We drafted, Jared Verse to play on the side. We're going to count on rookies. We're going to rebuild the secondary and try to go through. They lost Aaron Donald. They also lost Raheem Morris, which is a huge loss as well. He's the guy who organized and made that defense happen and made it work out of what Brandon Staley left behind for 3 seasons. They don't have any of that now. They have a better secondary. They have much worse linebackers. They have a much worse defensive line. And, that can be covered up against some opponents. They play Chicago next week. Sean McVay can figure out a way to beat Chicago. I don't know that he can figure out a way to beat Kyle and the 49ers just because of who Kyle is, the hold that he has over that rivalry, and the baseline of players. I mean, the Niners are very banged up. Their baseline is way higher than the Rams baseline. When you lose somebody, it comes down like that, So I think they've got a shot. I think that they're a competent team. I don't bet against Sean McVay figuring stuff out because he's repeatedly figured things out over his 8 years in the NFL. San Francisco is a tough matchup, and it's tough to win when they're full strength and good, when they have Aaron Donald up front wreaking havoc. So, it's tough to bet against the 49ers this week for me.
Chris Shula is Don Shula's grandson. If you know that name, if you see that name, you're like, oh, that sounds very familiar. Yes, that's Don Shula's grandson, who I guess went to Miami of Ohio with McVay. He's the defensive coordinator. Okay, yeah, so they go back to college. What can you tell us about Shula as a coordinator? I'll say this, Greg, man, I know this is a work in progress, D. I know Aaron Donald just walked away, but Jared Verse and Byron Young off the edges, that's a nice place to start. And Fisk is a high motor guy, and Kinchins was a good player at Miami. What's the Ram defense look like? Is there anything that you can tell us about Shula and his kind of tendencies or philosophy?
We're still learning about him. The main thing that seemed to have played out from what we've seen through 2 games is that he's trying to take, what Brandon Staley emphasized and things that he was into, and try to play them out over the new personnel that they have. Raheem did a great job of taking Staley's defense, all the innovations that we all know about, and it's establishing it in terms of what they had, and then adding tweaks and surprising things that confuse people. We haven't seen yet what Chris Shula really wants to do with it. We know from talking to him and from talking to Sean McVay that they want to go back to what they had before while still taking it forward with the strengths they had. Like you said, they have 2 strong edge rushers now, but they're very young edge rushers. Commanders. They have two strong guys up front in Braden Fisk and Kobe Turner, but they're both young. I mean, they're counting on, and then when you add Cam Kinchins, they're counting on 5 rookies or second-year guys to make big contributions around that veteran secondary, and the linebackers who they clearly don't care who plays middle linebacker for them because they let Ernest Jones go for nothing. So you have to think that the way they think about it is that Quentin Lake at safety is going to fill the role that Ernest Jones did at linebacker in some ways, mopping up most of the tackles, getting in the middle of the defense, coming up front, hitting the line against running backs. So we'll see where he goes in the long run. It's very hard to tell because, Chris has been on this staff the entire time, that Sean has been here. And he's coached linebackers. He's coached the secondary. We got to know him a little bit, but he's never been one of the more vocal assistant coaches that tells you, that sounds like I'm angling to be a coordinator. So this is my philosophy. This is what I think of that. This is what I think of this. Because we try to talk to him occasionally, preseason, and sometimes you can get coaches during the week. He's been pretty guarded so far. I wasn't in town for a lot of training camp because I was at the Olympics, but he's been very guarded in terms of what he's said and what he wants to do, and while praising his players and stuff. So I think the next few games will really tell us what we want to know about him in terms of where he wants to go with it. And more importantly, where Sean McVay wants to go with it, because these guys are so tied together. Like I said, they're college roommates. Chris Shilla used to stay at Sean's house as a house guest for the first couple of years when they were working. Chris didn't get a house right away. He didn't have a wife and kids, so he didn't get a house right away. So they were frat boys hanging out together. And we'll see what he does in the long term. In the near term, it's too hard to tell, what he wants to do and what he's able to do with the players he has.
Who's got the upper hand in this battle between two of the NFL's better offensive young coaches? I mean, it's funny. I don't even think I can call Kyle young anymore. He's been so weathered. He's aged like a president in this role. I mean, he really has. I mean, it's you look at his picture from the day he was introduced. It's like, who is that high school kid? Now he's like, it looks like, he's rugged. He's got this, salt and pepper beard, and he's just looks beaten down. But who's got the edge? Who's got the edge? Is it Shanahan, who's like 8-2 or something like that, or something like that? I don't know if that's the exact record, or is it McVay who got the big win? He got the NFC Championship win. He's got the Super Bowl ring on his finger. Is it a great relationship because both believe that they have one up on the other right now?
That's the ultimate barroom argument. I mean, is it better to, peak in the Super Bowl year and win the NFC Championship game over your buddy and then win a Super Bowl ring? Or is it better to maintain consistent excellence over a period of years where you beat the Rams 10 of the last 13, I think it is. And that's in the two of those wins are the NFC Championship game, which is great, but we all know that game was a toss-up that could have gone either way. And the game last year where Carson Wentz beat Sam Darnold, that, barely counts as an NFL game. So I tend to favor consistent excellence because I think that's harder. I think the Rams have done a good job of loading up for the Super Bowl run, and they nailed that. And they weren't just good that year; they've been good for 5 years, 6 years, 6 of the 7 that Sean was here. So, I mean, you got to if you're Kylan's argument, you got to say scoreboard. I mean, it's 10 out of the last 13. He beats him down twice a year with alarming regularity. So I think they're 2 of the 3 or 4 best coaches in the NFL right now. So you cannot lose if you're a Niners fan or a Rams fan. Both these fan bases were very fortunate. These 2 guys were on the market when they were both looking for coaches in early 2017. I think it's been great. It's ushered in an incredible era of California football and a great NFC West rivalry, which I think is amazing and will continue to be amazing for as long as Sean can stay focused on football and stay in this job. But in terms of picking one, if you're going to put a gun to my head and make me pick one, I think Kyle Shanahan's done, more consistent stuff with the players that he has, and the Niners have built a more consistent roster. But, Sean's got a ring.
Yeah, Sean's got a ring, and that's in a lot of ways that's the bottom line. Greg Beecham with us, kind enough to give us some of his time. 2 last questions for you. Stan Kroenke stays in the background. At least we don't hear about him up here. Maybe he doesn't stay in the background. But when he bought the team, it was like this mad dash. We got to sign veterans, forget the draft picks. Let's go for veterans. Let's build this thing up. We need to win a Super Bowl. We need to rebuild the audience that we left for St. Louis. Some of these people became Niner fans, Raiders fans, Chargers fans. Now we're back. We want to reclaim LA, and they won their Super Bowl. But is it working? Because 75% of the crowd is going to be Niner fans, if you believe the estimates. What is the mood, the appetite, whatever? You're from here or spent time here and are now there. So you have a little perspective on that market, I'm sure. What can you tell us about kind of how Los Angelinos feel about the Rams?
I think the Rams have done everything that you can possibly do in the circumstances that they were given to build a fan base. You got to, you go back to 1994 when a woman who owned the Rams was bamboozled into an awful business decision to move a franchise from the nation's second largest media market to St. Louis. It's just, I mean, times have changed. Stadium finding is different, but there's just no denying that it was an inexcusable thing. And you cannot be surprised that people took it personally in Los Angeles. And remember, before that, the previous 15 years, the Rams have been playing in Anaheim again because they were cheap. So, they left Los Angeles in general and left it.
Well,
to the
and
Raiders.
you should probably explain what that means. Cause like I'm from Northern California. You spent time up here and there. If you're watching this on YouTube, you're all from a different part of the country. Anaheim is Orange County. That's a different place than LA. I mean, how would you explain it? I mean, other than that.
It's 30 miles away from downtown Los Angeles, and that's a long way to drive for a football game. It's still the same market, whatever. These definitions become fungible, but the bottom line is people in Los Angeles don't consider Orange County to be part of Los Angeles, and people in Orange County don't consider Orange County to be part of Los Angeles either. So, it's a dividing line, and it's a fake dividing line, but it's real in terms of the hearts and minds of people. It's real in terms of who you represent and what you mean to a community, and that's what a lot of sports is about. I mean, it's about representing a community. And I know, having covered the Niners, I know the struggles between Candlestick Park as opposed to Levi's in terms of like the way it relates to a community. And San Francisco is a little different because the sports fans in the Bay Area are scattered all around the Bay, and it's a different setup. Los Angeles loves its Los Angeles teams. I mean, the Lakers and the Dodgers are by far the most popular teams, way past anything else. USC football had the great run in the 2000s where they became the de facto home team. And while the Rams were in St. Louis, a lot of people adopted other teams, and a lot of people adopted the 49ers because the late 90s 49ers were very interesting. Steve Young is a very interesting player to root for. They contended. Steve Mariucci knew what he was doing. He won a bunch of games, and then by the time
you're in you're in that region.
Yeah.
So you're getting all those television games, right?
Exactly. You're watching the Niners every week. They're winning. I mean, that's a good team. Seifert's got good teams. Mariucci's got good teams. By the time the Niners got bad, they already had a foothold in this market. That survived the 2000s when I covered the team when they were awful, and then it stayed that way. It's generational. This is sports fandom is not a logical thing. You don't just root for. You don't change teams. You stick with who you got. And when the Rams leave town, when the Raiders leave town, a lot of people take that personally. You know what I mean? And the Raiders are different because they're kind of, they're California's team. They have an outlaw image that goes beyond sports, but the Rams did not have that. They were a team that abandoned Los Angeles to move to Anaheim, then abandoned Los Angeles to move to St. Louis. And they lost a lot of their support. They lost a lot of their fan base. The Rams have come back. They've tried to do everything possible to rebuild what they had going here and make it better, honestly. I mean, they built, a gorgeous stadium. They've got cool, eye-catching uniforms. They've got a charismatic head coach who's one of the best in the league. They've run through a succession of star players. They made 2 Super Bowls. They've won a championship. You can't do a lot better than that in 8 years in terms of like building a foundation for something. And they are doing it. You see more Rams gear and jerseys and everything and flags and all that kind of stuff than you ever did. It's been a gradual progression every year they've been here. Having said that, it's generational. The 40-year-old guy who picked the Niners as his favorite team when he was in high school is not going to change just because the Rams came back to town and are really cool and interesting. He doesn't care. He can follow the 49ers online. He can watch your show. He can read. He can do all that kind of stuff. So, it's the Rams, to their credit, understand it's generational. You talk to the front office, you talk to those guys. They understand what it is. They know they're not going to win over the guy who already picked the Niners, who already picked the Raiders. They're trying to win new fans. They're trying to win the hearts and minds of the next generation. I think it's working as well as it can. It takes a lot of time, and the stands are going to be very red on Sunday.
Greg, you're a terrific guest. Last question for you, and we really do appreciate your time. Everybody should follow Greg on X and read his writings. And it's funny. There are so many people that have read tons of your recaps and stories. They may not realize it.
Exactly.
Greg is you've read Greg. I guarantee you, if you've read sports in Los Angeles, you've read Greg. Wild card factor in this one, because the Rams are down some guys, the Niners are down some guys. This is pro football, and somebody always can step up. To me, as a onlooker, the guys that I fear in this game, Tutu Atwell. The 49ers did not have an answer for Justin Jefferson, who just burned them for a 97-yard touchdown last week. I asked the defensive coordinator about the matchup with Odom a backup safety at the line of scrimmage there in man coverage, locked up with Jefferson. He didn't really have anything to say about it other than, he didn't make the play. Well, we know he didn't make the play, but it's a terrible matchup. So I'm not sure if the Niners have the DB to stand up to Tutu Atwell and the speed that he possesses. He can run right on by. And then I would say the other wild card is this kid from Texas, Jordan Whittington, who's a strong receiver. He's young, but with no Cooper Kupp and no Puka Nacua. I mean, those two guys, I think, are the two guys that I probably fear the most in this game outside of the edge rushers. Give me your wild cards on either side of the ball in this game. Who are wild card guys to you for Niners or Rams?
You took the words right out of my mouth on Tutu Atwell, because he's a guy who has performed, like we said earlier, he's performed whenever he got an opportunity under Sean, but Sean has not given him many opportunities at all in terms of, whether it was from the Robert Woods era onto, the guy, Puka stepped in front of him. Obviously, I mean, Puka's a generational talent, it looks like. So we'll see what happens when he comes back. But Tutu Atwell is a guy who runs good routes, who's a professional receiver, from a good college program, who can get open, and he's often the fastest guy on the field when he's out there. And like you said, Sean will have watched Justin Jefferson run away from the Niners, who are down a DB, down a key cornerback. So I think they get those guys out there in 3 receiver sets. You've got Demarcus Robinson and Tyler Johnson drawing some attention. You may be able to split Tutu into situations where you can be a threat downfield. He's also a good threat in the possession game. He when you see a guy with that much speed, you're like, oh, he's the deep threat. He can also catch the ball mid range. He's had some really good games for the Rams when Sean has let him. I've always thought when he gets on another team, he's gonna be one of those guys who people would be like, oh, this 5th-year receiver came out of nowhere and is really good. Well, we've seen that he's good. He just has trouble breaking into Sean's receiver group. And Jordan Whittington is another guy who has a lot of skills, who's just as young and is just in the game trying to figure out what his role is. So I could see them having a package for him and having some things that he can do as well. In terms of the Niners side of the ball, they're so talented. I mean, just that roster has impressed me for 5 years now in terms of the way they find guys who just step up and play another role. So I couldn't pick an actual one person, because I just feel like Kyle does such a good job of getting guys who he's worked on in practice and he knows certain things they can do. He can put them in that situation to be successful, and they go out and do it. Sean's been like that sometimes, and sometimes you're like, oh man, I really wish you would do this or that. Maybe because I know the Rams a little bit more. I know a few more things about them, but I will say that if I was searching the waiver wire in free agency, on a fantasy team, I would be scooping up Tutu Atwell like nothing. I would grab it.
Yeah, in fact, one S Flood here says, great insight and interview coming from a diehard Niners fan. Yeah, Greg, you've been fantastic. I would say your knowledge of the Rams is probably the best of anybody we talked to this week. I got to ask you, since I don't have an answer, and I've asked this question a couple times. Ernest Jones, what happened there? What happened with Ernest Jones? He was their leading tackler. They need this guy against the run. They've given up 5.8 a carry, 5.3 a carry. They traded a really good inside linebacker to Tennessee this summer. What is there? There's got to be a backstory, right?
You can't get an answer from the Rams on or off the record in terms of what actually went down. So we're left to piece the pieces together, from context clues. I would assume that there was some sort of dialogue with Ernest Jones' agent that was, that made them think that angered the Rams in some way. They'll never admit it. They would never say that. But to trade your leading tackler, to trade a do everything guy who looks really good in Tennessee, and who is exactly what they need for, a marginal upgrade and a late round pick in 2026, it just boggles the mind in terms of not letting him play out his rookie deal, which he had said he would do, So it doesn't make any logical sense. And when you ask Sean, he says, oh, it's a football decision, which is clearly, I don't know how that's possibly true, that they thought Troy Reeder and Christian Rosebin would do as well as Ernest Jones. I just don't see that. It also speaks to how much they value the middle linebacker position, which is not at all. They don't really care who plays it. They've proven that over the years. They've done that for years. They let Corey Littleton, who was a Pro Bowler, walk for nothing, just because they didn't want to give him a veteran contract. He wasn't even going to get much of a raise. So They literally don't care who plays that position. They care more about who the safety is stepping up to make big hits and stuff in that role that they've currently got Quentin Lake in. And Cam Curl can play as well. So they care much more about that than they do who's the linebacker. But the trouble is, when a coach sees that, he can exploit that. He can get Troy Reeder in pass coverage sometimes. He can get Christian Rosebin in pass coverage sometimes, where they're going to lose 9 times out of 10. It's not that they're not good players. They're just not at the level that Ernest Jones is in terms of like coverage, in terms of versatility, in terms of football instincts, all those things that Ernest Jones is better at. So we don't know exactly what happened, and we assume there was something behind the scenes that the Rams can be ruthless. They can cut ties with guys and not look back. They got rid of Robert Woods, hometown guy, got hurt before the Super Bowl, beloved, great locker room guy, the Rams like, no, done, we're done. Got rid of Cam
Yeah.
Akers. He fought with a running back coach. He did something wrong, and he was their leading rusher. Came back from Achilles injury to play in the Super Bowl. Got rid of him, tossed him out. Sean can be ruthless that way. Les can be ruthless that way, and that part of being a pro in pro sports. But it's also kind of rough when you lose a guy like Ernest Jones for a defense that could really use a guy like Ernest Jones.
Something tells me mid third quarter, there's gonna be Rams fans in that stadium going, why did we get rid of Ernest Jones again? Hey, Greg, awesome stuff, man. Love reading you, have for years. You do an incredible job. Keep up the great work. You're a great follow on X. Thanks for coming on. Maybe late in the year when the Niners run it back up here at Levi's, we can get you back on. Love reading you. Best of luck to you. Have a great season ahead. And thanks for your time tonight on Niners Nightly.
That'd be great. Thanks, Larry. I had a good time. Talk to you soon.
Yep. Greg Beacham. Fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. Definitely the most knowledgeable Rams person we've had this week. And we've had a few Rams people this week. He was fantastic. And I knew he would be because he's a veteran reporter who's covered this team for a lot of years. So, the guys who are on the beat and cover these things for years and years, man, the knowledge that you do build up in season, out of season, the sources that you build up over time, your coverage becomes like quite a bit better than some of your counterparts. And that's, I think, what we heard just there with Greg Beacham. He is fantastic. And as I said, you guys have all read him because all those AP recap stories on the Rams, you're reading Greg. A lot of times people don't realize who you're reading. You're reading Greg. When you're reading the Niner recap stories, that's Josh Dubow up here for AP, and he does an amazing job. He was with us last night on the show, and the AP picks some really, really good people. It's a big job. It's a big job. Why? Because if you get it right or if you get it wrong, it's going across a ticker in Hong Kong. You know what I mean? It's like, so, there's a responsibility that I'm nothing against the CC Times or, whatever, Los Angeles Times, which my brother used to work for. And, there's a lot of great newspapers. I'm a lover of newspapers. I was, I looked at newspapers as the greatest deal ever. It was a quarter to get the Chronicle and think of all the things that you could get out of it. But, the people who are covering it for the AP have a responsibility because their stories literally go global daily. And so there's a responsibility that comes with that. You have to be very circumspect in how you report, and you have to be very responsible in how you report. And you can't necessarily, you might lose out on a story here or there because you're going to want to be the first to it because you got a higher calling in some ways, because what you're going to put out there in the ether is going to go global and you're going to have to answer for it. So I've always had a kind of a better, or just a little bit more respect for the AP writer because of the impact that their stories often carry. Okay, a couple of things I want to get into here on the matchup. What we'll do though is we're going to take a quick timeout, and we're going to come back later on this hour. Claudia Gestro, who's a friend of ours, she's down at Dodger Stadium, I believe, tonight, covering the Dodgers. She's a big baseball fan, but she's going to jump in. We'll get her perspective at some point between now and the top of the hour. But what we'll do right here is we'll take just a 1 minute water break. And then we'll come back. We've got a couple thoughts on the matchup, and we'll tell you what happened today in Santa Clara in great detail next on Niners Nightly. All right, welcome back to Niners Nightly. Larry Krueger with you on a Friday. It is September the 20th. And by the way, little programming note, tomorrow's 49er forecast, which was supposed to be on the radio between 10 and 11 a.m., will be on YouTube exclusively tomorrow because the Giants game, tomorrow's Giants game, has been moved up. So Marty's time has been moved up. So we will be on YouTube and YouTube only tomorrow morning from 10 a.m. till 11 a.m. So join us on YouTube tomorrow. And we may visit with Jordan Elliott. We may just bring you a lot of the locker room sound that we did, a lot of the locker room interviews. I'll tell you, today, it's just as far as we get into in this segment, I want to get into what happened today down in Santa Clara because it was kind of an eventful Friday. I love Fridays down there because it's just there's less media. You can talk to the players a little bit more. Players let their hair down because there's not so many media people. And you can just get better dialogue on a Friday afternoon. But John Lynch stopped by on KMBR with Marcus and Carey this morning and told the boys that Talanoa Hufanga is going to return on Sunday. He's going to add a communicator on the back end. He'll be on a snap count. We tried to press Shanahan at the presser. What kind of snap count are we talking about? He wouldn't divulge. Why would he? You're going to tell your opponent how many snaps you want to play your safety. I mean, it's just, you keep that stuff close to the vest. So Huff is going to play, and he's going to play on a snap count, and that should help, the secondary have fewer busted plays. The other thing I thought was kind of interesting is that when Lynch this morning was asked by the fellas about, the injuries, CMC's out, Debo's out, Kittle's doubtful, and what are you going to do? Who's going to step up? And John's like, hey, man, we got a deep roster. We got a really deep roster, and we like our backups. So what does that mean? Eric Saubert and Jake Tongas. Braden Willis will get the injury designation off the practice squad tomorrow. He'll be called from the practice squad to the active roster for Sunday's game. Confirmed that this afternoon when I was talking to Mason Pline. I said, are you getting the activation? He said, no, it's going to Willis. So it should go to Willis. He's more of a veteran at this point. But then Ronnie Bell's maybe going to have an opportunity in this game. Chris Conley practiced with some serious intent this week. Jacob Cowing. Lynch hinted to Marcus and Carey that Jacob Cowing could be a factor on Sunday, I think is how he termed it. And I had a chance to go into the locker room and talk to Jacob Cowing. We'll play that interview tomorrow night on the show. To me, that's going to be really interesting. What role does Cowing play? Because without Debo, and you look at those numbers, and I asked Brock about, the numbers that show that the Niners are getting less separation at the receiver position than any other team in the NFL through 2 weeks. Now, granted, it's 2 weeks. But what does that mean? That means that they need more speed at wide receiver. They need more dynamic athletes at wide receiver. Debo's a great player, but he's a bull. He's 220 pounds or whatever he is. He's big. He's not a run away from you kind of a guy. He's a run through you kind of a guy. George Kittle's not a run away from you kind of a guy. He's a run through you kind of a guy. Brandon Ayuk probably, I thought when I watched the All-22 against the Vikings, had the best separation of any receiver the Niners had. He's just not right now in a rhythm with Brock Purdy because Ayuk took the summer off to get a big paycheck. So now he's working his way back, but he hasn't looked like Ayuk the first couple weeks. They need Ayuk to be Ayuk in this game, but they also need somebody who can separate and give them a dynamic, vertical separation type threat. And Jacob Cowing is that guy. It's not JJ. It's not Debo. It's maybe not even Ayuk. It's Jacob Cowing. It's Jacob Cowing that runs sub 4.4, who might be able to really, separate vertically. And I talked to him for, 5-10 minutes in the locker room today, and he's excited, man. He's excited for his opportunity. He understands. He muffed a punt last week. We talked about fielding punts as opposed to catching passes. And he said, you know what, when you're running routes, you want to pluck the ball with your hands. But when you're catching punts, you do want to catch it up against your body. Well, it hit him up in the pads and ricocheted off. And luckily, I think Isaac Yadam fell on it. Otherwise, it would have been a major muff punt and a major turnover deep in Niner territory. Ultimately, the Niners lost the game, but that move right there, if they had lost that fumble, that would have almost lost them the game. And Cowing would be one of the GOATs. And I'm not talking about greatest of all time in the eyes of the fans. So he's fired up. Niners are not going to hold that against him. He's not going to get endless chances, but he is a very coveted player and a guy who's got big time speed and the ability to potentially make a huge impact for the Niners on Sunday. So that's really what came out of Santa Clara today. By the way, the Rams will be wearing the white. The Niners will be wearing the red come Sunday. So that's something to watch for. Also, talk coming out of the Rams camp is that Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp, with them both being out, that maybe Kyron Williams could be in the slot as a receiver, with Blake Corum, the rookie from Michigan, being in the backfield as a running back. So very interesting. Lots of interesting angles on this thing. And joining us is Claudia Gestro, who's down at Dodger Stadium tonight. Claudia covers the Rams in LA. Claudia, how are you?
Hi, how are you doing? Can you hear me? All
yeah,
good?
we can hear you. Yeah, we can hear you loud and clear. There's some noise in the background, but that's all right. What do you think of the game on Sunday? Give us your perspective. Niners Rams.
Well, you know very well what's going on right now, Larry. There's a lot of injuries going on with the Rams. So, I mean, also with the 49ers, but not as bad as the Rams injuries right now. It's a very critical moment for them, and it's a must win for sure for the Rams, especially because of this rivalry they got going on with the 49ers for a long time.
Now you're at Dodger Stadium tonight.
Yes, correct. I'm here at Dodger Stadium. It's super crazy because obviously what happened yesterday was a big historic moment of Shohei Ohtani, tons of media today, and it's gonna get wild for the postseason.
50 home runs and 50 stolen bases for Shohei Ohtani. If you walk around Los Angeles, you're down there, when you talk about the fan bases down there, would you rather? I mean, who's the here? I would say it goes Niners, Giants, Warriors. Some people might say Niners, Warriors, Giants, but the Niners have the top seed. Who's got the top seed in LA? Is it Lakers? Is it Dodgers? It's not, or is it the Rams? Because the NFL's enormously popular.
Well, that's actually a pretty good question. I personally think the Dodgers will be number one on the top for sure. A lot of Dodgers fans, and then maybe the Lakers after that. But totally the Dodgers. And right now, the Dodgers are like the best team everybody wants to watch because of Shohei Ohtani. It's the showtime.
It's unbelievable. Giants fans right now are gritting their teeth, going, "What? What?" Our owner said that we offered $700 million as well. What do you think of McVay's Rams? I mean, I gotta think, Claudia, that they're going to come into this game just in total desperation mode after the first couple of weeks, and especially after last week. What's the talk around Ram camp this week?
For Ram camp this week, it's definitely we have to look at what's going on with the offense. I mean, unfortunately, with Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua out. One of the questions obviously that you were talking about is which receivers will Stafford throw to. Cooper Kupp obviously is out with a high ankle sprain, and they don't know how long he'll be out. Some said it would be possibly around 4 weeks. We don't know yet. Puka Nacua will be out possibly around 9 weeks or so. It's in the injury reserve, so that's really bad for the Rams. Good for the 49ers. Yesterday, the offensive coordinator, Mike Spur, talked about how important it was in the moment to give an opportunity to other players and to look at it as positive. When we see some players in action like Marcus Robinson, Tyler Johnson, Jordan Whittington, great opportunity for a rookie and Tutu as well. Those are the main targets along with the tight ends, Colby Parkinson. So I think, they're going to really thrive, but it is going to be a big challenge for the Rams.
We're having a hard time hearing you, so we'll just go with this last one. But what do you think of McVay right now? And obviously McVay is a great young coach. He's already won a Super Bowl.
Yeah.
But it's amazing watching when the Niners go there. It's all Niners fans. So how much momentum do the Rams have in LA right now?
That's a good question. You put me on the spot right there because obviously the 49ers have a big fan base everywhere. Expect a lot of 49ers fans stop by for sure. It's always red right there, so it's crazy. I would say the momentum, well, definitely because they need to win. It's a must win. They need to win this game. So, we know about that rivalry between the Rams and the 49ers, but also we're talking about, the two coaches, Sean McVay and, Kyle. So we have, that rivalry going on between those two coaches in LA. We know all about it. And Sean wants to win those games. But as we know in history, the 49ers have won a lot of games in SoFi. So we'll see what's going to happen.
Claudia, we're going to have to jump because the audio is so bad, but good to see you. Hope you're doing well, and hopefully we'll talk to you soon.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that.
No problem. Claudia Gestro from Southern California. She covers the Rams down there. I mean, the audio, come on, the Wi-Fi. Somebody said, Scott Green, the crappy Wi-Fi at Dodger Stadium. It's a nice stadium, but the Wi-Fi, not necessarily the best. That's okay. And Claudia's been covering the Rams for a while, but she's been focusing on the Dodgers, I'm sure. With Shohei Ohtani going 50 homers, 50 stolen bases, 10 RBIs in a game. I mean, Shohei had maybe the greatest baseball game any baseball player's ever had. I mean, and think about that. We're talking about a sport that goes back to 1870. Very interesting piece today, I thought, in the San Francisco Standard by Tim Kawakami and Dave Lombardi. And they kind of went through 5 questions that I think are kind of interesting that we could go through right now in relation to the Niners as they get ready to play the Rams on Sunday. And the first one was, do you go over or under on Brock Purdy with a passer rating over 100? Now, here's the thing about this, and I brought this up to Greg earlier this hour. We kind of assume the Rams are really, really bad. And maybe they are. We know they're really beat up. This was a 10-win football team. What has happened so far? They played the Lions straight up in Detroit and then just got waltzed over in the overtime, right? They lost 2 or 3 key players, so they weren't nearly the same team in week 2, and they just got their doors blown off by Kyler Murray. And Kyler Murray last week against the Rams had a perfect passer rating, 158.3 for Kyler. So he was awesome. Connor was awesome, rumbled up and down the field. That tight end McBride from Colorado State was incredible. Marvin Harrison's kid had 130 yards in the first quarter. How about that? He had more yards in the first quarter than his dad had in any individual quarter in his entire career. So, you look at the Rams and you think, well, the Rams, Kyler Murray killed them last week and they got beat in the overtime by the Lions. But maybe Kyler Murray and the Arizona Cardinals are better than we think. The Lions are thought to be an NFC championship game contender, Super Bowl contender. So, it's like this assumption is that, man, the Rams are awful. This is the get right spot for the Niners. They're going to dominate. They're going to walk up and down the field on the Rams. But I just don't know that that's the case. So the question is that Tim and David were talking about, will Brock have a passer rating over or under 100? Well, his passer rating, so Murray's was 158.3. Purdy in week 1 had a passer rating of 89.9 against the Jets. He had a passer rating last week against the Vikings of 101.3. So in 2 games, that averages out to 96.3 is his passer rating. So far, if you're going over or under, based on that, you would say under. But then you look at Brock's career, and Brock has had better than a 120 passer rating already 8 times in his career. The guy's only played, 18-5? He's played 23 games. He's had an over 120 passer rating 8 times in 23 games. So I would say over. Give me the over on Purdy with the passer rating. Now, I think they're going to run the ball. I think it'll be a run-heavy scheme, but I think they're going to have success running it. And then I think the Rams are going to have to put that extra guy in the box, and then it's Brandon Ayuk time. And I think Ayuk is a big day. And I'd like to Ayuk in daily fantasy if I could get him. Okay, so then the next question they ask is 49ers. Which 49er is going to have the most yards from scrimmage? And one of the guys went with Ayuk, and that he'll be the featured guy. I think it was maybe Tim went with Mason, who leads the NFL with 48 carries after 2 games. I would say most yards from scrimmage has got to be JP Mason. I mean, the Rams are been outrushed in 2 games by like 258 yards. I mean, they're not just not good against the run, they're disaster against the run. So I got to think it's a big JP Mason, maybe 20, 25 carries for JP Mason. And we'll see. We'll see how physically he is 3 weeks into this gauntlet of an NFL season. But if I got to go with most yards from scrimmage, to me, it's either Ayuk or JP Mason. And I'm going to go with Mason. And then the third question they ask is which 49er defensive player will make the most big plays. So sacks, forced fumble recovery, pass deflections, interceptions. And I just don't know how you could go against Fred Warner because he literally did all of that last week. He had a sack, he had a forced fumble, he had a pick, he had a TFL, he had a couple PBUs, he had a bunch of solo tackles. I mean, come on, Fred right now is on another level. And you know what I love about Fred? It's like when you get to a certain point, you start to become a clear thinker. It's like he's now a veteran. He's impatient. He wants to win so bad that it's like he's cut winning down to its pure essence. And what does he view winning as? Possession of the football. So now Fred Warner just comes literally to punch that ball out every single time. He's looking to punch the ball out every time the ball carrier has it. He's thinking about possession of the ball, not just making the tackle, not making a big hit, not making the woo hit, get possession of the football. And it was why Dee Ford was so good at the end of his career because he was great at the strip sack. And that's what Fred's starting to be perfect at. He just goes and punches right at the ball. When he's tracking down the ball carrier, I guarantee you, if you asked him, he would tell you he's not looking at his some days they'll say, look at his belt buckle or look at his midsection so you don't miss. He's looking, where is the running back holding the ball? And I'm going to punch right on the ball. And that's what he's doing. And he's got a couple forced fumbles already. He looks terrific. So to me, it would be him or Lenore. And Lenore's an amazing player, but I'll go with Fred. I mean, Fred's on a different level. Okay, the next question they asked, the fourth one is the non-star 49er player who's likely to make a splash Sunday at SoFi. Now, there weren't a whole lot of splash players in week 2. In week 1, Malik Collins made a great splash. Jake Moody had 6 field goals. He's not a star. He made a great splash. JP Mason obviously had a huge day, close to 150 yards. So those are the guys who made the week 1 splash. I will go with Jacob Cowing because I heard Lynch this morning kind of say, hey, you know what? Look out for Cowing. I also know he muffed a punt last week. And he's going to get that opportunity to field punts again. And I just think that he's the vertical speed they need. He's a dynamic receiver. They need a dynamic receiver. I think Cowing is going to be a really good player. He's a very veteran college player. He had a full career at UTEP. Then he transferred to Arizona, had a nice run there. So it's like he's learned different offenses. He's really cerebral kid, wants it really bad. Started off kind of with not a great start with the fumble, the muff punt, but at least the Niners got the ball back. But I think he would be my wild card factor for the 49ers. I think he's the non-star player that you could look up and he could be, 7 catches for 111 yards and a touchdown, something crazy like that. And maybe if I had to go with another guy or somebody on defense, I think I might go with Yatir Gross-Matos. I love what I'm seeing out of Yatir Gross-Matos in practice. This guy is practicing a million miles an hour. Man, I mean, he was setting the tone for the speed of practice among the defensive linemen today out there in the field. Spin moves, power, coordinating moves, going through the drills at full speed. Yatir Gross-Matos looks like he's ready he's healthy. He's ready to play. I think you're going to see him a lot on first and second down at defensive end for Leonard Floyd. And then both Dave and Kawakami went with their predictions. Dave said 27-17. So he's got the Niners by 10. So he's got the Niners winning and covering. Tim thought it was even going to be a bigger blowout. He's got 30-13 49ers. So this spread opened at 5.5, went to 7.5, and I think it's down to 6.5. I like the 49ers. That's kind of a big number, though. I kind of like the 49ers more on a teaser bet or on the money line. I don't know that I feel confident giving those points on the road, especially, Stafford gets rid of the ball in 2.6 seconds. Kyron Williams is a Pro Bowl running back who's had a couple of really down weeks. Blake Corum is, I think, one of the best rookie running backs in the entire league. And they still have these guys. Now, the Niner defensive line should dominate, but guess what? The Niner defensive line should have dominated Minnesota's interior last week and didn't. So I don't know what they're going to get out of Hargrave. I don't know what they're going to get out of Collins. I think at this point, it's all kind of a guess as to what those guys are going to give you. So I like the Niners on the money line. I like the Niners to win the game. But Kittle's probably not going to go. So Debo's not going to go. And there's a chance that Mooney and Bosa don't go. So now you're losing your best guy on both the front end and the back end. So I don't know about that. I don't know about the 49ers giving points, but I do like the 49ers to win the game. I don't believe they're going to lose to this Rams team. I do think the 49ers will win the game. Another guy, this was kind of an interesting week down there as well. We'll play some of the sound tomorrow on the show at 10 a.m. But, Jake Brendel has the lowest pass blocking grade of any Niner lineman on PFF, 29.5. He's last. He's ranked 34th among all centers in the league. And I know you guys know there's only 32 teams. So that's not good. And his pass blocking in this last game was just really bad. When I asked Forster about it, he's like, yeah, the lowlights really, stood out. But then I said, why is Jake a better option than the other guys? And I'm asking. I mean, I'm not, it looks like I was sitting there going, hey, Jake is not the best option. I'm asking. Chris Forster is a veteran O-line coach. Chris, why is Jake your best option? And he loves Jake. And so he quickly rattles off 6 or 7 things, and we'll play it tomorrow on the show, tomorrow morning. But 6 or 7 things that, in his mind, Brendel's better than Barch. He's better than Nugent. He's better than Zakel. He's the veteran, and he's better at these things, according to Chris Forster. So Forster didn't want to, play around with anything other than Brendel's my guy. Sorensen was asked about Collins and Hargrave, who were, I seriously could have parked a car between Darnold and those guys most of the day on Sunday in Minnesota. And he's like, yeah, I love those guys. They look really happy with those guys. They made very little impact in the game. So, we're kind of there where we're just kind of getting through the interviews to kind of just, I'm not saying placate, but just like, I asked Brock Purdy. The league states, the stats show that the 49ers receivers are getting the least separation of any wide receiver group in all of football. And yet when I asked Brock about it, of course, now I didn't expect him to be like, yeah, you're right. My receivers aren't getting separation, but it was more along the lines of when receivers aren't getting separation, because they don't always get separation, the quarterback's forced to throw more of those 50-50 balls than he normally would. So, that means probably more interceptions are coming. But Brock was like, hey, I don't think the film shows that. He's maintaining his guys are getting separation. So we'll find out this week. We'll get another example of where they're at on both sides of the ball. But ultimately for the 49ers, you can't lose the game on special teams. You can't muff punts. You can't have punts blocked. So that's first and foremost. You got to have a cleaner game on special teams. You got to really watch out for Stafford. I don't know that you can sack Stafford. He gets rid of the ball in 2.5 seconds. But you got to have real tight coverage, and you got to know you're down in distance, and you got to know your situation when you're going to the line of scrimmage on every play. I think the Niner O-line's got to do mental reps over the next couple of days and make sure that they don't look as confused as they looked against Flores' front. And the Niners secondary's got to have less busts. There was 4 busted plays that burned them in this last game. You take away those 4 busted plays, the 49ers probably beat the Vikings. Instead, one goes for 97 yards to Jennings. One goes for a touchdown to Naylor. One goes to Powell for 11 on 3rd and 7 on the final drive. Those kinds of busts are the reason that the 49ers lost the game to Minnesota, I think. You can't have 3 or 4 high-profile second-half defensive busts where you're just allowing conversions or points way, way too easy, almost just like no moss. You can't have busted plays, 3 and 4 busted plays that result in key first downs and huge touchdowns and multiple touchdowns and win. You just can't. So we'll find out if Sorensen's up to this job. He looked good in week 1. His defense looked really good. Week 2, not so much. All right, that's going to do it for us tonight on the YouTube side. Hope everybody has a great Friday night. Check me out tomorrow at 10 a.m. on YouTube. Jordan Elliott from NBC Sports Bay Area is supposed to be joining us, and we're going to play you a lot of the locker room interviews that we did throughout the week that we have yet to put out there. So we'll hear from Jacob Cowing tomorrow and a number of the conversations that we had inside the locker room with Niner players. Check that out from 10 to 11 tomorrow morning on the KNBR YouTube channel. And that does it for Niners Nightly on this Friday night. Have a great night, everybody. Appreciate all you guys. Some of the comments, we didn't get to a lot of the comments in the chat, but thank you for all the people in the chat. Jedi says, thanks, Larry. We got this one from Lance Malone. He says, take care, Larry. G. Martinez says, Sorensen, just BS. Okay, there you go. MF, a vote for Drake Nugent. I do think Drake Nugent's pretty good. Let's see. Invader 49 says Brendel or Jake Brendel can play better than he has so far, for sure. Yeah, so there you go. And then MF with a Giants question. Will Mason Black make the rotation next year? MF would not be MF without Giants baseball questions. And we'll hit that another time. But anyway, have a great night, everybody. Enjoy your Friday night. Watch some college football. Join me tomorrow at 10 a.m. on YouTube for 49er Forecast. And then join me on Sunday. I'll be with Adam Copeland and John Lund for a segment on the pregame show leading into Niner football. And then join me in the postgame with those guys as well. And then I'll head over to the Krueger show for a little postgame as well after I'm done with the KNBR postgame show. We'll run over to the Krueger show and do a little post game on the YouTube channel over there. So thanks to all you guys. Have a great night. And there you go. Hope you enjoyed Niners Nightly this week.